Searchers at a landfill near Winnipeg think they may have found human remains. It's believed that the remains of murdered First Nations women Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron ended up at the landfill in May 2022. The search began in December, and during a press briefing, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew highlighted that the stage of the search is a difficult one and could stretch for a very long period of time.
So this is going to be a difficult stage. It could stretch on for a very long period of time. Of course, on a personal level, professional responsibility to manage expectations aside, on a personal level, I hope that this search concludes quickly with the result that the families are looking forward to. And I hope that we can then move on to helping them walk through the next stages of their healing journeys and of grieving their loved ones who were taken from them in what are some of the worst crimes that we've ever seen in the history of our province.
The provincial government spearheaded a search of the landfill after police had refused to search the area because of safety concerns. Following the discovery of the remains, Mr. Kinew took to X that the RCMP is now investigating and steps for identification are underway, and that the families of the women have been notified and attended the site. The Globe and Mail's Temur Durrani joined us from Winnipeg for more on the search. Temur, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what do we know about what happens next in determining if the remains are human and if they are either Miss Harris or Miss Myron's?
Yeah, so this next stage is going to take at least a few weeks. Already, this is way ahead of time from what we've reported so far. And again, we've been at the top of the story from the beginning just about this. I mean, it's the reason why we've even established a new bureau here in Manitoba for me to be here. Part of that is because, this was a real problem all the way back to the 2023 general election, before which in 2022, these women were murdered. Over the course of last year, once the trial was wrapped up, which was a months-long trial for these four murdered women, when the serial killer was found guilty, after that, and along with it, the province really started in earnest to go through with this landfill search. And so now we're at this stage after they really truly started digging down in December, building all these different sites where they by hand went in. Now they have found human remains. Whose human remains they are, though, we still don't know. The province still has to confirm this fact, who this person is, who this woman is. That's something that the chief medical examiner's office and the RCMP are now going to be involved with. So it's going to take a little bit of time. After that, we could possibly have a funeral, the vigil. There's a lot of protocols set in place for that.
And if the remains are found to be human, what happens if it's not one of the victims?
I want to be clear, right now we know that they are human
Okay.
remains. What we don't know is which human this is. So they're possible that there's a sort of like specific thing about it. These are human remains. So this is why it's such a big deal for the families to be told finally that yes, this is happening. This is kind of, what you've been fighting for, what you've been told that you've been asking for this. You want to make sure that the government goes through this search process, which again took government changes and police to change their opinions and a lot to get to this point, right? So that's why it's a big deal. The next stage now is to identify this person. So that could take at least 2 weeks. It could be done earlier. This stage of even finding these human remains, which were 18,000 cubic meters, like a whole mountain that they had to quite literally move at the top of this landfill to move it away, then by hand go through it. That's what's been done now. So they're not going to altogether stop the search. At this point, once they identify which woman, whoever these women are, if there's maybe they're specifically different people, that's something they're going to confirm over the next few weeks. So right now it's a bit of a halt in the search process to confirm exactly what's been found here.
Now, Premier Wab Kinew made the search an election promise during the campaign, and he did follow through with that once elected. Now, I mentioned already that he had posted on X yesterday an update of the new developments. Has he provided anything else since that post?
Yeah, so yesterday actually we had an interview with him right last night. In fact, actually even the clip that you just played before, we'd reported that morning at the Globe because he told us about this in advance about that new stage. That was the final stage that is at this point sort of concluding at this point from this discovery of the human remains. From what Mr. Kinew told me yesterday, right now it's about the families. So it's just making sure that they're okay. It's just making sure that this discovery really allows them to sort of it's a very complicated thing to process. I mean, the whole thing really has been, but also to try to understand that, they might, what they found right now might not be the women that they went out looking for. In Manitoba, this is a real crisis for women, girls, Indigenous women, and Two-Spirit people. And so, this is something that's been happening for a while. The statistics are out there about how much of a real issue this is. And so we know how acute this problem is, thereby we don't know if this woman who was found there, if this person who was found there is another Indigenous person who has also gone missing or murdered. And we don't know if that is something that they'll find in this landfill. They'll continue to search for the other two women who they went out looking for, however.
Now, I do want to just talk about the landfill search in general. How daunting of a task is that? I mean, it was initially stopped because of safety concerns, but I couldn't imagine having to not only look through a landfill, but you're looking for human remains. How overwhelming is that for the searchers?
Absolutely. The searchers themselves have not been able to talk to us. It's a really gruesome, long process. I've been there at the site. Just the size itself feels enormous, and the amount of work that they've put in over the course of just a few months has been a lot. But for the families, this is something that they've always stressed about, that this is always possible. If someone goes missing here in Canada, especially, if this is someone that goes missing in the circumstances that these women went missing, we're going to go looking for them. At this point, this overwhelming process, this idea that, how much of this search led us up to this point is because of all of these workers that have been building these sites, these exact like full big buildings that they've built there at this landfill site to take away this mountain from one spot and put it into another spot, specifically going through by hand to make sure that the human remains that they might find there are left intact. So it's a really gruesome, heavy process. Over the course of my reporting when I've been there at the site, it's just been just a range of emotions for people because, again, also a lot of family members have volunteered to be part of this search process. So even those family members who are at the site are actually physically involved in helping the government with its search as well.
And throughout the Skibiki murder trial, you were in close contact with the families of the victims. And today, one of the daughters of the victims actually said in an interview, "I just want my mom." What would it mean for them if their loved ones were finally found and a proper funeral service could be held for the two women?
Absolutely. That was Elle today. She's the youngest daughter of Morgan
Mhm.
Harris, one of the two women whose remains are potentially going to be found at this Prairie Green landfill. From the beginning, especially through the trial, in my conversation today with Elle, she kind of just, really made sure she wanted to highlight this, that it's a lot of complex emotions, right? You're trying to understand that there might be some hope here now, that you could finally get this dignified funeral, which is the reason why they've been fighting, to go to Ottawa, to go to Manitoba's legislature, which again, the ruling progressive conservative government at the time had put up billboards all over the province, had put up radio ads, and had put up newspaper spots saying that if you vote for us, we will listen to the Winnipeg police and not search for these women because it's too dangerous and too costly. This idea, and this is something that Premier Canoe mentioned to me yesterday as well, and the families mentioned again today, is it's showing us now the idea that we've now found human remains at this landfill is showing us that it was feasible all along, that it was realistic all along, that this was something that could be done. In fact, only within a course of less than 3 months, right? In December, they went fully started digging down there and started sifting through things.
Mhm.
At that point, they hadn't, but by then they'd only built up sites and they were planning, right? It took 3 months for them to find a possible human being there. So that's something that Elle really wanted to highlight how the feasibility of this was something they wanted to stress all along. But it took them more than 3 years because they believed they were Indigenous women. And that's the reason why nobody wanted to listen to them because of these systemic problems we have in Canada.
And with the homicide rate for Indigenous women in Canada being 6 times higher than the rate of non Indigenous women and girls, is Canada doing anything to change this? You've touched on this multiple times that this is a problem in Canada, but are we seeing anyone actually taking the step to do something about it?
Yeah, I've actually talked to the federal Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, and he's talked about a lot of different initiatives he's been putting in. There's something called a red dress alert. Manitoba has been called sort of ground zero on this crisis, right? Because here, because of the overwhelming population of Indigenous people here, this crisis really does feel like a real home ground problem where women go missing all the time, possibly murdered. We never even get to the stage of a criminal trial, as this case did, which again, even the judge gave us at the Globe an interview to tell us about how much of a template this case really is for us to examine what happens next. I think this case in particular, what you're sort of asking here is a question we should all ask ourselves as Canadians. At this point, we should ask ourselves, why have we let this happen for so long? Why is it that we don't treat Indigenous women, especially Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people who go missing, as human beings, and the same level that we would our own family member? And the families have stressed today, even community leaders like the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs stressed that at this point, point, the money that we're putting to these initiatives, the red dress alert, something like that, that the cops go looking immediately when a woman who goes missing because of this acute crisis, is going to help us. So we can't sort of look at it as just a money thing. This is a real crisis we're facing as a country. It's our long-term residential school history that gets back us to this point, when it makes us and reminds us that, we're still living this history of women going constantly missing and not feeling like they're human beings, and their families feeling like they're not the same things as any other people, as your daughter, my sister, somebody else would be.
Well, thank you so much for the time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.